I want to take you through something that happened on Capitol Hill on Tuesday that looks on the surface like a routine procedural vote, but is actually one of the most politically consequential moments of this entire war. And once you understand the full story behind it, you will see exactly why. Here is what happened. The United States Senate voted 50-47 to advance a war powers resolution that would force President Trump to withdraw American forces from Iran unless Congress explicitly authorizes the continuation of the war. That is the 8th time Democrats have brought this kind of measure forward since the war began on February 28th. The previous 7 times it failed. This time it did not. And the reason it did not fail tells you more about where this war is headed politically than almost anything else that has happened this week. The vote moved because of one man, Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, a 2-term Republican, a doctor, a man who voted to convict Donald Trump after January 6, 2021, and has been living with the political consequences of that vote ever since. On Saturday, May 17th, Cassidy lost his Louisiana Republican primary. Trump had endorsed his opponent, Representative Julia Letlow, and called Cassidy a disloyal disaster and a terrible guy on social media. Cassidy's political career in his home state was finished, and then he walked back into the Senate chamber on Tuesday and for the first time voted to advance a war powers resolution limiting Trump's ability to wage war without congressional approval. Hell hath no fury like a Republican senator scorned by his own party's president. That is not my phrase. That is the headline that appeared in the press the moment the vote landed, and it captures precisely what happened. Cassidy joined Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Rand Paul of Kentucky in crossing the aisle. 3 Republicans who were absent from the vote, John Cornyn of Texas, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, and Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, tipped the scales by simply not showing up. The resolution advanced 50-47, and the political ceiling on this war cracked for the first time. Welcome to Dr. Nora Len. Today is May 20th, 2026. This is the complete 8-part breakdown of what that vote actually means, how it happened, why it happened, what Cassidy said in his concession speech that told you exactly this was coming, what the War Powers Act actually requires, and what Trump's own administration has been doing to avoid it, how the Cornyn situation could crack the majority further, what the midterm math looks like for every Republican senator who is up for election in November, and what the realistic path forward is for a war that is now 80 days old and has no congressional authorization behind it. Subscribe right now and hit notifications, because this story has 8 layers and you need all of them. Let me take you back to Saturday night in Louisiana, because that is where this story actually starts. And what happened in Baton Rouge on May 17th set every domino in motion that fell on Tuesday in Washington. Bill Cassidy lost his primary badly. He did not advance to a runoff. He fell far short. Trump's endorsed candidate, Julia Letlow, outperformed him decisively in a state Trump carried by 22 points in 2024. The result was not a surprise to political observers, but the margin was brutal, and it left no ambiguity about the message. Trump had ended Cassidy's career in Louisiana Republican politics, and the Louisiana Republican electorate had ratified that outcome without hesitation. But here's what Cassidy did in his concession speech. He stood at the microphone and delivered remarks that were so precisely calibrated as a declaration of independence that every reporter in that room knew immediately what was coming next. He said, when you participate in democracy, sometimes it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, but you don't pout, you don't whine, you don't claim the election was stolen. He said our country is not about one individual. It is about the welfare of all Americans, and it is about our Constitution. He told reporters he was proud of his work to uphold the Constitution and would carefully consider how he would vote on several priorities of the Trump administration going forward. Carefully consider. That phrase was not accidental. Cassidy is a doctor. Doctors choose their words with precision when they matter. He was serving notice that the remaining months of his Senate term, which runs through January 2027, would not be spent as a loyal soldier for an administration that had just worked to end his political career. He was a lame duck with nothing left to lose. And a concession speech that read like a declaration of war. On Tuesday morning, he posted on social media explaining his vote. While I support the administration's efforts to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, the White House and Pentagon have left Congress in the dark on Operation Epic Fury. Until the administration provides clarity, no congressional authorization or extension can be justified. That is a Republican senator who chaired the powerful Senate Health Committee telling the Pentagon directly that he considers the executive branch's conduct of this war to be constitutionally deficient. And then he voted to advance the resolution. The political logic here is completely transparent. And that transparency is part of what makes it so significant. Cassidy did not flip because he suddenly changed his mind about the war. He flipped because Trump made it cost him nothing. When you have already lost your primary, when your political career in your home state is finished, when the president has called you a disloyal disaster in public, the usual calculus of Republican senatorial behavior, which is to avoid crossing Trump at all costs, simply does not apply anymore. Cassidy was liberated by his own defeat, and he used that liberation immediately and consequentially. Now, let us understand what the War Powers Act actually is, and why the administration's posture toward it has become the central legal and political battleground of this conflict. Because most coverage treats the war powers votes as a political sideshow. And they are not. They are a constitutional reckoning that is getting louder every week. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 was passed in the aftermath of Vietnam specifically to prevent a president from waging extended military campaigns without congressional authorization. It sets a 60-day clock. Once American forces are committed to hostilities, the president has 60 days to either obtain congressional approval or begin withdrawing. After 60 days, hostilities are supposed to automatically cease. The president can extend the clock by another 30 days to allow for an orderly withdrawal, but that is the outer limit of unilateral executive authority under the law. The war in Iran began on February 28th. The 60-day mark fell on May 1st. Trump did not seek congressional authorization. Trump did not acknowledge the deadline. Instead, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told senators that the administration's position was that the ceasefire reached on April 8th had paused or stopped the 60-day clock because it ceased hostilities. Senator Susan Collins, who leads the powerful Senate Appropriations Committee, rejected that interpretation directly. Senator Adam Schiff said bluntly, "In my view, this war was illegal from the start because there was no attack on the United States, and there was no imminent threat of attack." Senator Richard Blumenthal put it even more plainly. There is no pause button in the Constitution or the War Powers Act. We are at war. We have been at war for 60 days. The blockade alone is a continuing act of war. That is not a fringe legal position. That is the interpretation of the statute that most constitutional law scholars support, and that multiple senators from both parties are now advancing publicly. Trump's own administration has challenged the War Powers Act as unconstitutional. That is a significant escalation of the executive branch's long-standing practice of simply ignoring the statute rather than directly contesting its validity. By calling the law itself unconstitutional, the administration is inviting a legal confrontation that no previous administration has been willing to initiate. And that confrontation, if it reaches the courts, would be fought on terrain that is genuinely uncertain. The Supreme Court has never directly ruled on the constitutionality of the War Powers Act. Multiple justices have signaled skepticism about congressional constraints on the commander-in-chief. The administration may believe it can win that argument, but winning it would require a court battle that unfolds in public, in real time, against the backdrop of a war that is already 80 days old, a close straight for $4.53 a gallon gas, 3-year inflation highs, and a Senate that just demonstrated it has the votes to advance a resolution demanding the war end. Let us talk about the 3 Republicans who did not show up for Tuesday's vote, because John Cornyn, Tom Tillis, and Tommy Tuberville did not accidentally miss the most consequential war powers vote in this conflict. They made a choice. And understanding why they made that choice tells you something important about how the Republican Senate Conference is actually thinking about this war right now, even as its public statements remain largely supportive. John Cornyn of Texas is in a Senate runoff against Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General. He has been desperately seeking Trump's endorsement for months. Trump has been withholding it and dangling it strategically to extract legislative concessions. Then on Tuesday, the same day as the War Powers vote, Trump endorsed Paxton over Cornyn in the runoff. A sitting senior Republican senator, the former Senate Majority Whip, the 4th most powerful Republican in the chamber, was abandoned by his own president on the same day his colleagues needed him in the chamber. Cornyn did not vote. Whether he stayed away to avoid being seen crossing Trump or simply because the political circumstances of his own race made attendance operationally complicated, the result is the same. His absence helped the resolution advance. The Times of Israel reported directly that Trump's grip on the Senate Republican conference is potentially slipping after Cassidy's primary loss, as well as the president's decision on Tuesday to endorse Republican Senator John Cornyn's primary opponent. Both of those things happened on the same day. On the same day the War Powers resolution advanced, Trump simultaneously demonstrated that he was willing to use the primary endorsement weapon against two different sitting Republican senators, one of whom he had just defeated, and one of whom he was in the process of defeating. That is not a signal that builds loyalty among the remaining senators who are watching and calculating their own exposure. Tom Tillis of North Carolina is not seeking re-election. He announced earlier this year that he would not run again. His primary is being contested between candidates with no incumbent. His absence from Tuesday's vote was a choice made by a senator who has shown some independence from Trump on other issues, and who now has the same political freedom from the primary threat that Cassidy acquired through losing. Tuberville of Alabama is a reliable Trump ally whose absence is harder to explain cleanly, but whose non-vote had the same effect as a yes vote in advancing the resolution. The arithmetic here matters more than any individual explanation. Republicans hold 53 seats. 47 voted against the resolution. 4 voted for it. 3 did not vote. If those 3 had voted against it, the resolution fails 47 to 50. And Tuesday looks like all 7 previous attempts. 3 empty Senate chairs moved the most significant congressional challenge to presidential war powers since the Iraq War era. 3 chairs. Let us talk about what Chuck Schumer said after the vote, because his framing captures the political strategy Democrats are running and why that strategy is getting more traction with every week the war continues. Vote by vote, Democrats are breaking through Republicans' wall of silence on Trump's illegal war. That was Senate Minority Leader Schumer in a statement immediately after the 50-47 result landed. He has been saying a version of this phrase after every one of the 8 war powers votes, regardless of outcome. After the previous 7, it was defiant but somewhat hollow, because the resolutions kept failing. After Tuesday, it lands differently, because the wall he has been describing cracked on Tuesday in a way that is measurable, documented, and on the record. Senator Chris Coons of Delaware told reporters that Cassidy's flip underscores there is steady progress towards a realization that we are overextended and diplomacy is the only reasonable way to resolve this. Steady progress is the operative phrase. This is not a sprint. This is a campaign of attrition designed to make the political cost of supporting an unauthorized war rise incrementally with every vote, until the cumulative weight of those costs forces a shift. And the cost side of that ledger is genuinely growing. The national average for gas at the pump stood at $4.53 per gallon as of this week. The latest inflation report confirmed prices at their highest level in 3 years, driven directly by the Hormuz closure. Harvard Kennedy School professor Linda Bilmes projected in April that the total cost of the war would reach at least $1 trillion. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve dropped 8.6 million barrels last week alone, the largest single-week drawdown in the history of a reserve that has been tracked since the early 1980s. Oil prices have not fallen below $100 per barrel since the war began. And the summer driving season, which typically pushes gas prices higher on its own, has not yet fully arrived. Every one of those numbers is a political liability for Republicans running in November's midterms. The 2026 midterm elections are 6 months away. 34 Senate seats are on the ballot. Republicans are defending several of them in states where the economic pain of the war is being felt acutely. And the political playbook for any Democrat running in a competitive Senate race writes itself. Gas prices are at $4.53 because of a war that started without a congressional vote. Your Republican senator has voted 7 times to keep that war going without requiring the president to get authorization from the people's representatives. And he is doing it while gas prices hit levels you have not seen since the Biden years. That argument is not complicated. It does not require policy expertise to understand. It requires a gas station receipt. Now, let us be honest about what Tuesday's vote does not mean. because the coverage of this resolution has in some quarters been presented as a major blow to Trump's war effort. And that framing overstates what actually happened. The 50-47 vote was a procedural vote to discharge the resolution from committee, meaning it advanced to the Senate floor for a formal vote. That formal vote has not yet happened. When it does happen, Republicans who were absent on Tuesday, including Cornyn and Tuberville, can show up and vote against it, potentially reversing the outcome. Even if the resolution passes a final Senate vote, it would then need to clear the House of Representatives, where Republicans hold the majority, and where Speaker Mike Johnson has shown no appetite for constraining Trump's war powers. Even if it somehow cleared the House, it would reach Trump's desk. And Trump would veto it almost certainly, using language similar to what he used when he vetoed a previous war powers resolution, calling it insulting and politically motivated. Even if it were vetoed and sent back to Congress, overriding a presidential veto requires a 2/3 majority in both chambers. A threshold that is nowhere near achievable with the current congressional composition. CNBC put it plainly. Despite the war powers resolution advancing 50-47, it still has little chance of becoming law. It would need to pass a final vote in the Senate, clear the House, and Trump would be almost certain to veto it. So what does it actually mean if it cannot become law? It means two things that are distinct from legal force but genuinely important in their own right. First, it is a political document. A 50-47 Senate vote is a public record that 4 Republican senators and the plurality of the Senate believe this war lacks constitutional authorization. That record exists regardless of what happens to the bill. It can be cited in campaigns. It can be cited in court filings. It can be cited by adversaries of the United States internationally and by historians indefinitely. Second, it is a signal of trajectory. This is the 8th vote. The first vote failed 47-53. The most recent vote passed 50-47 procedurally. That is a 6-point swing in a chamber that moves in fractions. And the direction of that swing is toward constraint, not support. Brian Finucane, a war powers expert at the International Crisis Group who previously worked in the State Department's Office of the Legal Advisor, said it plainly. Even if Trump were to veto such a resolution, as he did after the Soleimani strike, it would nonetheless be a powerful political signal that Congress opposed this, including members of his own party. Here is the dimension of this story that is getting almost no coverage. The Republican senators who are not up for re-election in November are not the ones who need to worry most about the political trajectory of this vote. The ones who need to worry are the ones who are on the ballot in 6 months. In states where gas prices are a live political issue, and where the war's economic impact is being felt directly. The 2026 Senate map is not uniformly favorable to Republicans. Several seats being defended by Republicans are in states where the median household income means $4.53 gas is a genuine economic burden, not an abstraction. Senators in those states have been calculating a version of the same equation every week since February. If I vote to end this war, I cross Trump and face a primary challenge from my right. If I vote to continue it, I own the economic consequences and face a challenge from my left in the general. That equation has been resolved in favor of loyalty to Trump 7 times. But Cassidy's defection, combined with the absences of Cornyn, Tillis, and Tuberville, has introduced a new variable into the calculation. The cost of crossing Trump may now be lower than the cost of owning $5 gas into November. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper told the House Armed Services Committee on Tuesday, the same day as the Senate vote, that the ongoing ceasefire has set the foundation for military hostilities to cease. But that Iran pushes it. He acknowledged that the state of preparedness in the region remained at the highest level, and that American troops were still in harm's way depending on a variety of different contingencies. That is the commander of U.S. forces in the region telling Congress simultaneously that the ceasefire is fragile, that Iran is the one pushing against it, and that American troops remain in danger. That testimony does not describe a war that is over. It describes a war that is paused on a knife edge, with an adversary that is actively trying to resume it. And it came on the same day the Senate advanced a resolution to end it. The political pressure building on this war from inside Trump's own party is not yet sufficient to change the outcome on Capitol Hill, but it is sufficient to change the political environment in which every Republican senator makes their calculations going forward. The wall Schumer has been describing for 3 months has not fallen, but a crack appeared in it on Tuesday that was not there on Monday. And cracks in political walls have a way of widening when the pressure driving them does not subside. Gas prices are not going down. The Oman talks have produced a good start on the Iranian side and deep skepticism on the American side. The ceasefire is on what the president himself called 1% life support a week ago. The War Powers Act deadline has already passed, and the senator who just voted to constrain Trump's war for the first time did so because Trump ended his career and freed him from every political constraint that had previously kept him in line. Here is the honest picture of where everything lands today, and what the next few weeks actually look like if you read all of the signals together without the political noise. The resolution that advanced 50 to 47 on Tuesday is almost certainly not going to become law in its current form. Trump will veto it if it reaches his desk, and there are nowhere near the votes to override. But the vote has done something that a veto cannot undo. It has established on the public record that Trump's war in Iran has now passed the constitutional deadline set by the 1973 War Powers Act, that a majority of the Senate believes congressional authorization is required, that Republican unity on this question is cracking rather than solidifying, and that the political cost of maintaining that unity is rising faster than the cost of breaking it. Bill Cassidy will not be in the Senate after January 2027. His lame duck status gives him the freedom to continue voting his conscience or his anger, or both, on every remaining piece of legislation that comes before him. He has already signaled he will carefully consider his votes on several other Trump administration priorities. That is a senator with nothing left to lose and a deep institutional knowledge of the levers available to a determined minority actor inside the Senate. He is not a marginal figure. He chaired the Senate Help Committee. He knows how to use procedural tools, and he has just demonstrated he is willing to use them. The Cornyn endorsement of his primary opponent on the same day as the War Powers vote is the story that everyone should be watching most carefully in the coming weeks. Trump has now used the primary endorsement weapon against the first sitting senior senator in his majority. Cornyn sits at number 4 in the Republican leadership hierarchy, at a moment when that majority cannot afford to lose Senate seats. If Paxton beats Cornyn in the Texas runoff with Trump's backing, the lesson to every other Republican senator who is considering independence on any issue is clear. Loyalty is the only protection. But if the lesson has the opposite effect, if senators who were already skeptical of the war decide that the primary threat is no longer a reliable deterrent because Trump is willing to deploy it regardless, then the coalition Trump needs to keep his war off the legislative agenda starts to become genuinely unstable. The midterms are 6 months away. Gas is at $4.53. The Oman talks are at an impasse. The ceasefire is on what the president himself called 1% life support. The War Powers Act has been violated by the administration's own timeline, and the Senate just told Trump by a majority vote that it thinks the war needs congressional authorization to continue. That is not the collapse of Trump's domestic political coalition on this war, but it is the beginning of the end of the period where he could wage it without any meaningful domestic political cost attaching to that decision. The ceiling on this war just got lower, and every week that the strait stays closed, every week that gas prices stay above $4, every week that 20,000 sailors remain trapped in the Persian Gulf, that ceiling will get lower still. Subscribe to Dr. Nora Len right now and hit that notification bell. When the final Senate vote on this resolution comes, when the Trump veto lands, when the next Republican defects, and when the midterm calculus forces the first genuine Republican reckoning with what an 80-day unauthorized war has cost them at home, we will be here breaking it down with the sourcing and the depth this story demands. Drop your read in the comments below, because the question that matters most today is this. Bill Cassidy lost his primary on Saturday and voted against Trump's war on Tuesday. How many more senators need to lose something before the next one follows?